Welcome to the Breaks Music Show, Episode 6. Douglas Jackson and Kayla, Lynn and the Change. Coming up for you here in mere moments. And please like and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and video platform.
Hi there, I want to let you know about an exciting podcast called The Breaks Music Show. So what is The Breaks Music Show? The Breaks Music Show is America's most informative new radio show highlighting the world's best unsigned artists. Be sure to find us on your favorite podcast platform as well as YouTube, Rumble, Twitter and more. Remember, every Friday is when you can hear interviews and music from 3 of the best unsigned artists in the world. The Breaks Music Show is a Grebo Inc. production.
Welcome to the Breaks Music Show. Today we have a great show in store for you. Douglas Jackson, he is joining us today. And Mr. Jackson was looking at your bio a little bit earlier. It says you have advanced degrees in music, you teach music at the university level, and you perform with some very prominent artists on trumpet. Can you give us a quick rundown on your background there?
Yes, thanks for having me. Break Show. I appreciate the interview and the time to taking to put this together. It's a great opportunity. I have a pretty eclectic background when it comes to music. And of course, I started playing music as a teenager and heavily influenced by the West Coast sounds of 60s and 70s R&B, going back to the earlier sounds of Jackie Wilson and Ray Charles. And then those heavy influences, when I was 13 years old, my older brothers and sisters took me to the Shrine Auditorium to see James Brown, and I haven't been the same since. I always loved that heavy horn sound and that syncopated sound and dancing and just part of it. And then moving on into the 70s with Earth, Wind and Fire, Kool and the Gang, the Gap Band. And of course, when I was old enough to get into nightclubs, I went to the Whiskey A Go-Go to see Tower of Power in around 1971. And of course, that was, a life-changing experience. As a result, I started bands in high school that were horn music or horn part influence, and that's been part of my musical DNA. I went through college. I was a bit of a college gypsy, but I'll just tell you very quickly. I went to the Berklee College of Music in Boston for a year. Great experience. Learned how to live in the snow. And then I wanted to have the HBCU experience. So I went to Xavier University in New Orleans. And musically, I say that everyone in studying music should spend time in New Orleans. You get the sounds and the rhythms of the streets. They come up through your body. As soon as you walk around the city, you hear the music, you feel the music. Around every corner, somebody's drumming or playing a horn. You see the funeral bands. It's just very interesting. After a year and a half in New Orleans, where I had the opportunity to study with the late great John Fernandez, who's legendary in the Louisiana area. He taught Wynton, he taught John Longo, Clyde Kerr, Tracy Griffin, all the legendary trumpet players in that area. And I was part of that studio, and I appreciate how he pushed me to be great, especially in the jazz improv area. But he was very concerned about the whole person and making sure his students learned classical trumpet. I went home to study at Cal State LA, and there that's where I actually finished learning how to play the instrument as a young person, and heavily involved, largely more so in the classical music area because that was a traditional music program. And then, playing in the basketball band, playing R&B gigs. At that time, me and a friend of mine, Daryl Street, who was actually a co-producer on the InStyle project, we started backing up reggae bands. And that was a whole subculture of music on the West Coast at the time. And we played at the Reggae Roadblock out at UCLA, the Veterans Auditorium in Santa Barbara, and those shows were always packed. And the interesting thing about it, there were always 4 or 5 bands on the bill. So you could end up I can recall going on stage once at a Reggae Roadblock at 2:45 a.m. and there were still people on the floor dancing. So that's how I cut my teeth. And then after college, I just took a hard left turn. I was one of those young people that was probably not sure what to do after school, and I landed in the mailroom at a local radio station. And from there, I got a job working at Motown Records in the royalty department, and my music publishing career launched from there. And as a result, I spent about 18 years on the accounting and administrative side in the music business. I worked for Motown Records, A&M Records for 5.5 years. Shout out to the royalty director, if she's listening, Lillian Stoddard, love her to death. I learned so much from her. Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss were really nice guys. They're very quiet guys. You could stand up, you could walk up and speak to them cordially, and the conversations were quick, but they were polite. And from there, but during that time, while I was working on the administrative side, I was also playing my horn, largely pickup gigs with R&B groups, again, the heavy reggae scene, and then, of course, playing a lot of music in church. That was the late 80s and early 90s, where the Baptist churches were starting to kind of loosen up on what they were allowing to have in their sanctuaries for music. And so the church where I attended as a child, Redeemer Baptist Church in Los Angeles, we had a horn section, and we played along with the choir, and we went on trips with the choir. So I was still immersed in the music scene while, of course, working as a publishing administrator. Late 80s or so, a gentleman by the name of Ira Selsky, an attorney, a well-known attorney in the music business, recommended me for a job at MGM Studios. And so in 1986, I picked up and went over to MGM and started a whole other career in participation accounting. And that term is the term that they use. In the record business, they call it royalty accounting. The film business, they call it participations. You are someone that's participating in the profits of the film. And that opened up an entirely different chapter in my life in terms of understanding show business from a much broader perspective, because in that arena, what's coming across your desk are contracts for major talent and how they are paid, how the advances are paid. You're looking at theater buildings, how prints are shipped out to theater chains, the collection process, how feature films are made available to theaters and then next to pay television, at the time released a video. And it was a real introduction into a much broader sense of the music business, and gave me an appreciation for the things that I didn't know at the time that now have helped me in my own career because of so many of the opportunities. I kept playing along that time, and then when my time at MGM ended, I decided to go back to graduate school to pursue a master's degree in commercial music at Cal State LA. I did that because I noticed that the music industry studies programs were starting to pop up around the country. And I thought it would be a cool thing for me to do, to teach in one of those programs. Well, little did I know that there were other things you need to do before you become a college professor, and that's one, you have to have a graduate degree. So I traded in my suits, and I bought some khakis and some jeans and some sneakers, and went to graduate school and hung out with the kids for 2.5 years in the commercial music program at Cal State LA again. And it was a great time. Deborah Howland, guitarist and songwriter, you may know her name. She was with Animal Logic. Deborah was the primary advisor in that program. Wonderful person, really took all of us people who were transitioning, and she just helped us transition into the academic part of the music industry. Also worked with Dr. Jeff Benedict in the jazz ensemble, and then Dr. Paul DeCastro, who introduced me to the Latin Jazz Ensemble. And that was the cherry on the cake, if you will, for me, because all of the time that you grow up listening to gospel music and you grow up listening to R&B music are really not paying attention as closely to the polyrhythms that are included in the music. And those polyrhythms are the antecedent. This is the stuff that is coming through the Afro-Latin culture that has worked its way into R&B and gospel music. And so working with Paul and studying under Paul in the Latin Jazz Ensemble was a real lesson for me, because I got to begin to listen to and understand some of the rhythms that we listen to today, where these rhythms come from and how they are taught and what they actually mean in terms of the traditional rumba or the Cuban rumba and then the Puerto Rican bomba. And those rhythms are very unique and incredible.
The Breaks Music Show. We're speaking with Douglas Jackson today, and I tell you what, let's do the first song here. This is El Nino on the Breaks Music Show. It's the Breaks Music Show. Today we're speaking with Douglas Jackson. And Mr. Jackson, with your background in the music industry, working on the business side for MGM and BMG, what advice do you give to your students?
I want them to be literate. There are so many cases in the music industry, in the history of the music industry across the board, where people signed documents that they didn't know what they were signing, and they lost their rights. So the first thing is the reading and writing. I have a session, a presentation that I call it's the copyright basics. And I introduce them every year. I talk to the freshman class about the 6 bundled rights that they have when they file the actual Form PA. And it's very important because it lends itself directly to how the music is licensing. They have the right to license distribution, public performances, print rights, derivative works, which are sampling and things of that nature, and now the management of the digital rights, which is the newest right that was inserted several years ago with the adaptation of the Digital Millennial Act. So it's very important that they understand that. The other thing that I stress is that the computer workstation now allows 5 or 6 people can be standing around in the studio and doing what they call making beats. And this person is suggesting one thing and they're making beats, or they're sitting in their dorm room and everybody's in the room. Well, they're actually contributing to writing a song. And the copyright law says when 2 or more people author a song, they own it equally unless agreed upon in writing subsequently. So the arguments start when someone runs out and says, well, that was my song. But then there were 6 people in the room at the time contributing to the composition. I need for them to understand that so that it doesn't become a misunderstanding at the time. It just simply, they understand either you're helping me or you're just listening and I'm doing this work on the workstation. But those are 2 very important contributing factors to the ownership of the copyright.
It's the Breaks Music Show, Douglas Jackson, and your music is described as world music and contemporary jazz. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, it goes back to the experiences that I've had. As we were talking in the last segment, for 2 years, I was immersed in a Latin jazz ensemble and started playing regularly with salsa bands in the LA area, and had an opportunity to travel to go to Cuba on an exchange with the Cal State LA Latin Jazz Ensemble with Dr. Paul DeCastro. And when I heard the music over there, Isaac Delgado, Inahela Banda, Los Van Van, and you hear that music and you go, my goodness, this is incredible. Who are these people? And so that background taken together with my background in art, rhythm, and blues music is how I fashion the way that I think about music. I also think about music from a world perspective because my late mother, Ella, used to say that you guys need to think on a global level. You have to think about not just what's going on around you, but because she traveled extensively around the world, so she used to think about other things that are going on in the world. And I think about music from not just what's going on in the United States, but maybe what someone else might be listening to somewhere else. Classic example is that I frequently get pop-ups on my Spotify account where people are listening to the Night Moves track. They were listening to it in South Africa. They were listening to it regularly in Brazil. And I had someone pop up on Spotify last month in Hong Kong. So I think that as the music industry itself, because of the internet, is now broadening the ability for people to distribute and hear the music, I see myself as someone who wants to produce music that appeals to a much broader audience, not just the audience in not just a domestic audience.
It's the Breaks Music Show with Douglas Jackson. As a trumpet player and world jazz composer and arranger, are there any production techniques that you're willing to share?
Well, you have to be able to critique yourself. And I listen very closely to recordings. Now, I am the kind of producer where I think of music in sounds and colors, not necessarily in a traditional sense where it all has to be written down and it has to be exactly that way. I think of music in sounds and colors. If the sounds and colors go together, then it is appealing, and that's what I listen to first. I think and I listen to music in my head before I write it down, and I begin to put those colors together, and I go into the studio and try to reproduce those colors. And the colors, they don't have to be down on a piece of paper. You can put instruments together, and this is what I hear. If you're hearing a violin and a flute together, or you're hearing a steel pan, certain rhythms go together with the clave, certain rhythms do not work with traditional clave. There are different drum beats and polyrhythms that go into how people appeal and feel about music. A unique example I use is there's a track on my CD called the Kodo Blues, where I actually was fooling around on a workstation one day and I found the Kodo sound, and it sounded very authentic. And I said, well, wow, that will work. So I put that together with this jazz blues theme kind of track called the Kodo Blues. And I've had 2 radio hosts pick up that track, and they said they love it. So that was a process of putting sounds and colors together. And that's how I think about music, and that's how I produce music.
It's Douglas Jackson on the Breaks Music Show, and the next song we're going to do right now is In Style.
1, 2, 3.
It's the Breaks Music Show, and we have more good stuff coming up for you from Douglas Jackson here in moments. We are back with the Breaks Music Show. I'm your host, Ed Steele. Today, we're talking with Douglas Jackson. And Mr. Jackson, given what the world has just gone through, how important is live music right now?
Live music is the heartbeat of the music industry. That's how it all started. Live entertainment, live music. And because it's how musicians get exposure and to their art. I'll give you an example, something recently. There was just a two-night episode on how the band Kiss was developed. And one of the things that they did is they found some CD club in Queens, and they played live, and they invited all the music executives, and they just kept doing it repeatedly and repeatedly. They build up their audience. I tell my students that it is very important. You guys go out, put a band together, and go out and play some gigs. That's how you get recognized. Also, from the pure arts economy perspective, live entertainment is the secondary income to recording artists. There's the income from intellectual property, which are the CDs and the music publishing. Sometimes that's not so great. But then if you can stay on the road and earn income, that is a very important aspect to your business. And if you look at some of the bands that have been very successful over the course of a long period of time, going back to the 30s, we're talking about Louis Armstrong stayed on the road. Duke Ellington stayed on the road. Duke Ellington said live performing and recording was one of the most important things that he could ever do to keep his band alive. Rolling forward now, you've got the Rolling Stones. They're in their 70s. They're still at it. Look at Earth, Wind, and Fire. They've got almost 6 months of one-nighters booked now. Kool and the Gang is still going. These bands, it's their secondary income in addition to the selling of records, which makes them such valuable commodities. And in addition to that, while you're touring at those shows, you can sell your merchandise, which is one of the reasons why the record companies are now heavily involved in the 360 deals, where they see that even though the reduction of the physical CD is gone down in some respects, they can still take advantage of the other merchandise which are attached to the artist profile. So it's very important to have that other income. T-shirts, mugs, you name it. And that's very important to the arts economy in itself, because how other people contribute and participate in that process.
It's the Breaks Music Show with Douglas Jackson. All right, Mr. Jackson, can you tell us about the Elizabeth City State University Jazz Festival, which you founded?
Yes, in 2011, as a result of, I was involved in a lecture series, and I presented a lecture series at the Museum of the Albemarle. When I was in one of the planning sessions, I noticed that there was a picture of the late jazz drummer Max Roach, and I responded to the people at the library. I said, well, that's Max Roach. And they asked me, oh, you know about him? And I said, yes, he's a legendary drummer. Well, Max Roach was born in Pasquotank County, about 11 miles from this campus. I was surprised to find that out. So I did a little research, and I thought, well, maybe it would be a hip thing to have a jazz festival in his name, in his honor. So my first festival was the Jazz Festival to honor the late, great Max Roach. And I brought in Joe Chambers, the drummer Joe Chambers, who knows Max, plays with Max, the UNC Wilmington Jazz Ensemble, and then, of course, my student ensemble, the Elizabeth City State University Jazz Ensemble. And we did 2 nights in Max's honor. Going from there, I produced a festival almost every year since then. We've welcomed violinist Lisa Terry, who's Clark Terry's cousin, Jay Sennett, the drummer and radio host, good friend, saxophone, smooth jazz saxophonist Marcus Anderson, who was with Prince's band, Grammy Award nominated instrumentalist, good friends of mine, Sean Jones on trumpet, Michael Dees on trombone, and then a steel pan organization called the Rhythm Project out of Virginia Beach, which are just a bunch of incredible kids, and everybody should hear them with those steel drums. It's fantastic. So every year I've had a festival. The last one with regional artist out of Raleigh-Durham area, Shauna Tucker, who is a jazz vocalist and cellist. Again, someone that everyone should hear. She's a fantastic entertainer, and she brought in a local gentleman by the name of Thomas Taylor, who's a drummer from Eastern North Carolina who teaches at North Carolina Central as part of her ensemble. So I do it as a means of community engagement, but also as an academic exercise. My students get to work with the artists, and the artists get to talk with them and engage with them, and they see what it is to be prepared, to be on time, what an intense rehearsal is, because I have 90-minute rehearsals with guest artists. In that 90 minutes, we probably have to work through a 2-hour show. So everyone has to be dialed in. And I do it that way on purpose so that my students will understand if you get a job and you get a job working with a major artist in Vegas, they're going to call you for a rehearsal. You have to be ready, and they hit, and that's it. You have to be prepared. So I run the festival that way as a mechanism of preparation. And I'm looking forward to doing it again in April 22.
It's the Breaks Music Show. Douglas Jackson with his song, It's the Reggae. I'm Ed Steele with the Breaks Music Show, a very educational show today, if I do say so myself. And a big thanks going out to Douglas Jackson. And Mr. Jackson, where can we find you on social media and how can we get in contact with you?
You can find me at douglasajackson.com, Facebook, Douglas A. Jackson Music Company. The record company is centroplexrecords.com, and you'll find all my music streaming on Apple Music, iTunes, Amazon, Deezer, and Pandora. And we have our physical CDs. We put them on sale at an even $10, shipping included. So that's a great deal. So log on to Centroplex and pick up your CD for an even $10 and listen to it and enjoy the Global Music Project.
Douglas Jackson on the Breaks Music Show, and you know it, we're going to have more for you in just a couple of moments.